different. I'm not sure if you're gonna like it, but I thought it might be a little interesting because as much as I love makeup and beauty products and stuff like that, I'm absolutely and totally, completely obsessed with books. I watch a lot of booktuber videos on YouTube and I thought I might try and share some of that with you. I've also gotten a few requests from people that know I love books to recommend some books, so this is for them. I thought I'd do a video about like my favorite books that I read in 2012, and I'm kind of a little bit copying Jessie the Reader by doing my top 12 of 2012. This was really hard for me, surprisingly. My original listed 16 on it, and I had to narrow it down. It kind of felt like I was killing off my children. It was really sad, but that's just how obsessed I am with books. So I'll just get started. They're in no particular order. So I'll start with the one that I don't actually own. I borrowed it from the library and then I borrowed it from my teacher because I was reading it for class, and that was We Need to Talk About Kevin by Lionel Shriver. I talked about it in my October favorites video, so I'll link that down below if you want to go and check that out. It's basically one of the creepiest books I've ever read, and I have read The Collector and Stephen King before, but this one was just, the character of Kevin was so perfectly done, and I 100% recommend it. It's so good. The movie as well is fantastic. So, the next book I have is The Book Thief by Markus Zusak, who apparently is Australian. I had no idea until after I read this. I was a bit behind on the bandwagon, but I bought this ages and ages and ages ago, and I only just read it this year, but I think it's fantastic. It's totally different from anything I've ever read before. It is a Holocaust novel, but it's told from the perspective of death. Death is the narrator, and I just find that so fascinating. There's a bookmark in it at the moment because I'm forcing my mother to read it, but it's really interesting, so I recommend this one. This next one I read twice earlier this year, I think, because it's rather short, but F. Scott Fitzgerald is one of my all-time favorite authors, and this is just a really fantastic representation of his work. It is The Great Gatsby, if you can't read the title, and it's a classic. The movie's coming out next year, so if you want to read it before then, I highly recommend it. Highly, highly, highly recommend it. Then this year I also reread The Perks of Being a Wallflower by Chbosky because I couldn't remember what the book was about, so I thought, oh well, I better read it again, and then I knew the movie was coming out, so that's why I read it again. But I was really surprised because usually I am not a fan of young adult fiction. I just don't really like how it's written or what it's written about, but this one is genuinely quite good. It's really interesting throughout the whole book, and the character of Charlie is just really intriguing and endearing, and it makes it a really good read. This next one I picked up secondhand because I read a lot of biographies and memoirs and things like that, and I heard that this one was really good. It's Girl Interrupted by Susanna Kaysen, and I think it's a true story. Yeah, it's a memoir about her experience in a 1960s mental asylum. That's the kind of book I really like reading, and people find me a bit weird for that, but I read this in a day. I thought it was so good and so easy to read, and I loved it. I really, really loved it. I was so glad I bought this. This next one I took with me to Spain, and I read it over there, but it's called Freedom, a Novel by Jonathan Franzen, who also wrote The Corrections, which is one of his famous books. This is basically a story, I tell people it's a story about human mediocrity, and it's just about how people expect so much of themselves and of others and of their lives, and it just kind of ruins it for them. So pretty much everyone in here goes from happy to really, really, really unhappy, and some of them become happy again and some of them don't, and I just really love reading books about human nature and people and how they interact with each other and themselves. So this was one of my favorites of this year, and I so highly recommend it. It is a bit long, but I just really, really like it. This is another one that I bought ages and ages ago, probably like 2 years ago, but I only read it this year, and it's Perfume, A Story of a Murderer by Patrick Suskind. I don't really know how to pronounce that. He also wrote another book called The Pigeon, which was on my original list, but I had to cross it off. But this is another book that's really interesting because I've never read anything like it. And it's told from the perspective of a young boy who grows up and becomes a murderer. So, the story of a murderer. But the interesting thing about him is, I think his name's Gnui? I don't really know how to pronounce French words, but he has a fantastic sense of smell, like surpasses any normal human, superhuman sense of smell, and it's just really fascinating how that affects his life and his actions, and I just, like, it's creepy, and the main character is very unlikable, but in the end, you kind of start rooting for him a little bit. This one is a total classic. I was a bit iffy about reading it because it is about a love affair between like a 12-year-old girl and a middle-aged man, so it was a bit of a controversy when it came out, but it is Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov, and I adored it. I thought it was really well written. The characters were just, they interacted really well with each other, and it was creepy and gross, but also a little bit fascinating, a little bit intriguing. This next one I also bought secondhand because I've always wanted to read it, and I've always wanted to see the movie, and I hadn't done both. I still haven't seen the movie, but I was just really interested in reading it. It's Atonement by Ian McEwan, and it's one of those books that halfway through my heart broke a little bit. The characters make choices that you're just sitting there reading thinking, why are you doing this? Why? And then as it neared the end, I started going, I don't really like it. I don't really know what's going on. And then in the last couple of pages, yeah, Ian McEwan really pulled it together, and it ended perfectly. Exactly how I love books to end. Really unsatisfactorily. So if you don't like books like that, maybe don't check this one out, but because of that ending, this has been one of my favorites this year. These next two might not be for everyone, but I definitely enjoyed them and I do recommend them. The first is The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins, another one I picked up secondhand, but my mother recommended it to me. I read a lot of classics, but I never read this one, so I thought I'd give it a shot, and it really surprised me in the way that it's pretty creepy and there are so many different twists and turns. It's really hard to predict the narrative, and I found that really interesting and really thought-provoking, and I just wanted to keep reading every time I picked it up. I know a lot of people probably won't want to read this because it's a classic and it's quite long, and just the style of writing is a bit hard to get into, but if you do like classics and you haven't read this one, I'd recommend reading it. Now this one, If on a Winter's Night a Traveler by Italo Calvino, yeah. This one almost wasn't a book for me. I picked it up in stores and read the back of it, and it just sounded so intriguing, and I, again, had never read anything like it that it made me want to. But once I picked it up and started reading, it's really strange. Every chapter in the book is a different story. They all start in the middle and none of them end, if that makes any sense. It's probably the hardest book to explain ever. It starts with a man who likes to read, who meets a girl who likes to read, and they know writers and they know revolutionaries, and it gets really strange. It goes into some of their stories and then it all circles back around, and I just thought it was so different, and every time I read it I was like, ooh, what's happening, what's quite happening, and I just really liked it. Totally not for everyone. I wouldn't recommend it to most people, but if you're looking for something a little bit weird, try this. And last but not least, my number 12 of 2012 is the classic The Catcher in the Rye by JD Salinger. I find it a little bit surprising that I hadn't read it until this year. A lot of my friends thought that was surprising too. A lot of people have to read it for school. I never did. My camera stopped filming, so I don't really know how much you got, but I really recommend this book just because pretty much everyone on the planet has read it, and there's so many references to it in our modern day, and It is one of the classics, and I do recommend it for that reason, but also because it's just a pretty good read. So that concludes my 12 books of 2012. I hope you enjoyed it. Please comment down below if you like this type of video, or like it below, and let me know if you want to see more of these type of videos. I can definitely integrate some book videos into my beauty videos. If you're interested, just let me know. So I just want to wish you guys a happy new year. I hope you all have a really great night or day or whatever, and a really great new year. I will see you in 2013. I've got a lot of videos planned, and hopefully I'll see you then. Okay, thanks for watching. Bye!